the world grows quiet and the story begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Sounds of Stories. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Sounds of Stories. Tonight's story begins where many terrible stories begin. Not in a haunted house, not in a graveyard, and not beneath a storm-dark sky. It begins in a diner. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the revised version of The Monkey's Paw, inspired by W. Jacobs. Let the pages turn. The old man was gone. John pushed through the diner's glass door and looked both directions along the rain-slicked streets. Nothing. No black coat, no gray-haired stranger, no sign that anyone had ever approached their table at all. Behind him, the bell above the door jingled. "John?" Jane called. He turned and stepped back inside. The warmth of the diner rushed over him again. Coffee, bacon, the soft murmur of conversations. Normal sounds, normal people. Everything felt normal except for the object resting on their table. The monkey's paw. It was a shriveled hand wrapped tightly in ancient cloth. It lay beside the ketchup bottle like something forgotten. It was small enough to fit in a pocket, ugly enough to make your skin crawl. Jane stared at it. "I hate that thing." John slid it back onto the booth. "I think that's the point." Neither touched it. For a moment, they simply watched it, waiting, expecting something, anything. But nothing happened. It was just a wrapped-up animal paw. Or at least that's what John told himself. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. Jane stirred her coffee. "You don't actually believe him, do you?" "The old guy?" "Yeah." John laughed. "Of course not." She looked relieved. "Good. Because if that thing grants wishes, I want a refund on reality." Jane smiled despite herself. The tension eased. The diner became a diner again. The strange old man became another weird story. Something they'd laugh about later. Something they'd tell friends. Something that would sound ridiculous by morning. Then Jane glanced toward Bill. The smile faded. 2 dinners, coffee, pie. Every dollar mattered. Every dollar always mattered. John noticed. "You okay?" She sighed. "I'm tired." "Me too." "I'm tired of checking her bank account before buying groceries." John looked away. There wasn't much to say, because she was right. Every month felt like survival. Rent, insurance, student loans, unexpected repairs, unexpected expenses, unexpected everything. The future always seemed one step farther away than it should. Jane glanced at the paw again. Then she laughed nervously. "You know?" John immediately recognized that tone. "What? You ever think about what you'd wish for?" "No." "Liar?" He grinned. "Okay, maybe once." "What was it?" "A winning lottery ticket." Jane nodded. "Reasonable." "What about you?" She didn't hesitate. "Enough money that we never have to worry again." John looked at her, not because the answer surprised him, but because it didn't. The rain intensified outside. Water streaked across the neon lights, red, blue, gold. Everything beyond the glass looked distorted, dreamlike. The monkey's paw sat silent between them, waiting. Jane reached toward it, then stopped. Her fingers hovered inches above the cloth. A strange feeling passed through her. Cold. Wrong. As though touching it would somehow commit her to something. She pulled her hand back. "Nope." John laughed. "What, are you scared?" "A little." "Of a wrapped-up monkey's hand?" "A cursed wrapped-up monkey's hand." Fair." The waitress arrived with a check. They both stared at it, Neither reached for it immediately. A familiar ritual, mental math, bank balances, credit card due dates, everyday fears, the kind nobody writes horror stories about. But maybe they should, because those fears never really leave. They simply sit beside you, waiting. John finally picked up the check. He looked at the total, then at Jane, then at the paw. The joke formed before he could stop it. A harmless joke. One sentence, one ridiculous sentence, the kind people say every day without consequences. Or so he thought. John reached toward the paw. Jane's eyes widened. "John," he grinned. "Relax." His fingers closed around the wrapped hand, and for a brief moment, it felt warm, as though something inside it moved. John nearly dropped it, but pride kept him from showing it. He swallowed, forced a laugh, and then finally spoke. "I wish for $2 million. At that moment, the phone inside John's pocket rang. Once, twice, 3 times. John stared at the screen. A name appeared that he hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Dad. His stomach tightened. Across the table, Jane noticed his expression. "Who is it?" John didn't answer. The phone continued ringing. Jane glanced at the screen. "Oh." Neither spoke. The name itself seemed to fill the booth. Dad. One simple word, one complicated history. Then the phone rang again. John finally answered. "Hello?" For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice, older than he remembered, tired. "John." His father's voice sounded strange, small, fragile, as if something had been taken from it. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, John said, "What do you want?" A pause, then, "I know you told me never to call." John looked away. Rain slid down the diner window behind him. His father continued, "I know we haven't spoken in a while, but..." Another pause. "Your mother passed away this morning." The world stopped. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough. Enough that the sounds of the diner suddenly seemed very far away. Jane's eyes widened. She could hear only John's side of the conversation, but somehow she already knew. John stared at nothing. His father's voice continued, distant, broken. "I know you and I had our differences, but..." A long silence. "I also know she loved you more than anything." John closed his eyes. The booth, the rain, the diner, the monkey's paw, everything seemed unreal. His father kept talking, words drifting together, fragments, pieces, like someone speaking underwater. "Left everything and her wishes, estate, all in your name. Wanted to take care of..." The voice faded, not because his father stopped speaking, because John could no longer hear him. His attention had shifted elsewhere, to the object resting on the table. The monkey's paw, still, silent, wrapped in cloth. It just sat there, waiting. "John." Jane's voice barely reached him. His father was still talking. Something about paperwork, something about arrangements, something about coming home. Home. The word struck harder than it should have, because home had never really felt like home. Not after the arguments, not after the shouting, not after the night he left, not after the final phone call. The one where he told his father never to call him again. His mother had tried to fix things. For years she had tried. Birthdays, holidays, letters, messages, excuses, bridges. Always building bridges. And all John and his father did was burn them down. Now, there would be no more bridges. His father finally stopped talking. "John?" John swallowed. "Yeah? You still there?" "Yeah." A shaky breath came through the phone. "I'm sorry." The words surprised him, not because his father said them, but because they sounded genuine. Then the line went quiet. Then, "She would have wanted you there." John didn't know how to respond. After another moment, the call ended. The screen went dark, and the diner returned. Coffee cups, silverware, conversations, life moving forward as if nothing had happened. Jane reached across the table. Her hand covered his. "I'm so sorry." John nodded, but his eyes never left the monkey's paw, because a terrible thought had entered his mind, one he couldn't force away, one he didn't want to believe. Yet he couldn't ignore it. Then the phone rang again. The inheritance was real. The amount would be close to $2 million. Exactly what he had wished for. Exactly. A chill ran through him. "No." Jane looked confused. "What?" "No." His voice was barely a whisper. "No." He grabbed the wrapped paw. The cloth felt warm again, warmer than before. For the briefest instant, he thought he felt something move beneath the wrappings. A tightening, a twitch, a living thing trapped inside. John nearly threw it across the diner. Instead, he dropped it onto the table. Jane jumped. "What's wrong?" John stared at the object, his heart hammering, because he suddenly remembered something the old man had said. Every wish carries an equal or greater cost. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The neon lights flickered. For the first time all evening, neither of them laughed. Neither of them joked. Neither pretended. Because somewhere deep inside, both of them had begun asking the same question. What if the old man had been telling the truth? Later that night, after the diner had emptied and the rain had stopped, John placed the monkey's paw on the kitchen table. Neither he nor Jane could sleep. At 2:17 in the morning, the paw moved, all by itself, and one of the fingers slowly curled inward. 3 days later, John stood beside his mother's grave. The sky was dark, the wind was cold, and the money was real. The estate documents had arrived. The numbers matched almost perfectly. $2 million. Exactly what he had wished for. Exactly. John hated that fact, because every time he looked at the paperwork, he remembered the old man's warning. Every wish carries an equal or greater cost. The funeral ended quietly. Family members drifted away, and neighbors offered condolences. The cemetery slowly emptied, and only John and Jane remained. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Jane broke the silence. "You can't blame yourself." John stared at the fresh dirt. "Can't I? Your mother was already gone." "I know." "Then the wish didn't cause it." John wanted to believe that, but belief was becoming difficult. Too many coincidences, too many impossible things, too many details lining up perfectly. The amount, the timing, the phone call, the inheritance, all of it. Too perfect, too exact. As they walked back toward the car, John said something he had admitted aloud before. "What if it works?" Jane stopped. "What?" "The paw." John immediately regretted saying it. Yet, once spoken, the thought refused to leave. What if it actually works? Jane looked away, because she had been wondering the same thing. Neither wanted to admit it, but both had considered it. Late at night, when the house was quiet, when the world felt uncertain, the thought came back. What if it works? What if the impossible is real? What would the second wish be? The drive home was silent. That evening, the monkey's paw sat on the kitchen table between them. Neither touched it, yet neither pulled it away. Hours passed. The paw remained exactly where it was, like a question neither wanted to answer. Finally, Jane spoke. "If you knew it worked..." John looked up. "What? If you knew for certain..." She swallowed. "What would your second wish be?" The question hung in the room. John should have said nothing, but instead he answered back immediately and honestly, "I'd bring her back." The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence followed. Jane stared at him. John stared at the paw. Silence met them where they were. Minutes passed. Neither of them saying anything because both knew exactly who he meant. His mother. The woman whose voice he'd never hear again. The woman who'd spent years trying to heal a broken family. The woman now buried beneath 6 feet of earth. John rubbed his eyes. "This is crazy. Maybe. It can't work. Probably not." But neither of them sounded convinced. Outside, rain began tapping against the window, the same sound as the diner, the same sound as the night everything changed. John's gaze returned to the monkey's paw, and a terrible thought entered his mind. One simple sentence, one impossible wish, one chance to undo the pain. The paw seemed almost harmless now, small, silent, wrapped in cloth. It just sat there, waiting. John reached toward it. Then he stopped all of a sudden. Jane's heart began to pound. "John," he froze. "Don't. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were." Then neither moved and neither looked up. The room felt colder somehow, as if something unseen had stepped inside and it watched them, it waited for them, and it wanted them. John slowly withdrew his hand. For a moment, relief filled the room, then 3 sharp knocks echoed from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Both of them jumped. It was nearly midnight. No one visited at midnight. But the knocking came again. This time, slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. John looked toward the door. Jane's face had gone pale, and somewhere deep inside, both of them were suddenly terrified of who might be standing on the other side. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the house. Neither John nor Jane moved. For several seconds, they simply stared at the front door. The clock on the wall read 11:58 p.m. The knocking came again. Slow, patient, almost polite. Knock, knock, knock. Jane's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Who would be here?" John didn't answer, because deep down he already feared the answer. The room felt colder than before. The rain outside had stopped. The house had become impossibly quiet. Only the knocking remained, and it waited. John stood. Every instinct told him not to go to the door, yet something pulled him forward. One cautious step, then another. The knocking continued, steady, unhurried, as though whoever stood outside knew they had all the time in the world. John stepped out into the hallway. His hand trembled. He looked through the peephole, and he froze. Nothing. No one stood on the porch. The porch light illuminated only empty steps and darkness beyond. John stepped back, confused, terrified. Then the knocking came again, not from outside, but from somewhere inside the house. Knock, knock, knock. The sound seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from memory itself. Jane gasped. On the kitchen table, the monkey's paw sat exactly where they had left it. One finger curled tightly inward, and a second finger now slowly bent. It was as though some unseen hand were counting. 1 wish, 2 wishes. Only one remained. John's heart pounded. This isn't real. Jane grabbed his arm. We need to get rid of it. I know. Throw it away. No, burn it. Do something. But neither moved, because they both knew the truth. They weren't afraid of the paw. They were afraid of what they wanted. John stared at the second curled finger. His mother's face filled his thoughts, her laugh, her voice, the way she always tried to make peace, the way she always said family mattered, the way she always believed there was still time. But now, there wasn't, and that hurt more than anything. The paw sat silently, offering one last chance, one last temptation, one last wish. John picked it up. Jane immediately knew. No! His eyes never left the shriveled hand. No, John! Tears filled his eyes. I just want to see her again. Jane shook her head. This isn't how. I know. Then don't do it. For a moment, it seemed he might listen. But then, finally, grief took over. That same grief that's defeated stronger people throughout history. The same grief that whispers impossible bargains in the middle of the night. John closed his eyes, and he made his final wish. I wish I could speak to my mother one last time. The house fell silent, completely silent. No wind, no creaking wood, no distant traffic. Nothing. Then a voice spoke. Softly, behind him. John. His eyes flew open. Jane gasped. Neither turned around because they both recognized that voice. It was his mother's voice, the voice he thought he'd never hear again. Tears streamed down his face. Mom? The voice sounded warm, gentle, familiar, exactly as he remembered. John. He finally turned. The kitchen stood empty. No one was there, but the voice remained. It was everywhere. It surrounded him, not trapped in a body and not returned from the grave, but simply present, like an echo carried from some place far away. I'm sorry, John whispered. The voice answered. For what? For leaving, for being angry, for wasting so much time. A long silence followed. Then, you were never as far away as you thought. John collapsed into a chair. Years of regret poured from him. All of the things he should have said, all the things he never said, all the things he thought he had lost forever. And through it all, his mother's voice remained, patient, loving, forgiving. Finally, John asked the question that had haunted him for years. "Do you know I loved you?" The answer came immediately. "Always." It was at that moment the room grew warmer, and the fear finally began to fade. The grief remained, but it felt different now. It felt lighter somehow. It was now easy to carry. John looked down at the monkey's paw, the final finger slowly curling inward. The cloth began to crumble, and the ancient hand collapsed into dust. Its work was finished. The wishes were gone. The bargain was thus complete. And for the first time since the diner, John understood the true cost. The first wish had taken his mother, the second had tempted him with despair, and the third had forced him to face the words he should have spoken while she was still alive. It's true that some gifts just arrive too late, and some lessons arrive with a terrible price. But truths remain hearing, no matter how long it takes. And at that moment, outside, dawn began to break. The first light of morning touched the windows. Jane slipped her hand into his. Neither spoke because neither needed to. The monkey's paw was gone. The wishes were gone. And at last, the silence no longer felt empty. And there you have it, everyone. The Monkey's Paw, a story that asks a simple question. If you could have your greatest wish granted, knowing it would come with a terrible cost, would you still make it? And thanks for spending your time here with us at the Sounds of Stories. Come back for another adventure. And remember, when the world seems to fade, the stories always remain.